Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cow Talks, the podcast that brings you the latest information about livestock and forage production systems in the southeastern United States. I'm Marcelo Wallau, Forage Extension Specialist and Associate Program Leader at the University of Florida. This episode today is a little bit different. A couple of weeks back, we went to the 41st Annual Northwest Florida Beef Cattle Conference and Trade Show to talk about best practice in pasture management. The message here was very clear. Don't get sloppy. Manage your ranch well. Good cattle prices are great for our production system, but we cannot be neglecting many aspects because they can dig into our profitability. If you are listening to this episode on Spotify, also make sure to check our video either on Spotify or YouTube because we have some very cool pictures and graphs to show with you. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and if you do, please let us know. Leave us a comment on our social media or send us an email to forages@ifas.ufl.edu. We'd love to hear from you. Get more feedback on how you're using this information to improve your production system. Thank you, and enjoy this recording. So first of all, thank you for being here today with us. It's always a pleasure to be at those events and for Extension to host you here. We are here to work for you, and we are very pleased to do so. Let's talk about what good pasture management is first. Let's talk a little bit about fertilization strategies because we realize that some people are skipping on fertilization, and that has because of high prices a few years back, and that has resulted in some issues in terms of pasture persistence. We're going to talk about pasture renovation. If that pasture is already beyond the point we can save it and we want to renovate. And I'll end talking a little bit about diversifying that pasture. I'm going to touch just a little bit in grazing management. Well, tell me, what is good pasture management for you? Rainfall, okay. I'll try to fix rainfall today. What else is good pasture management? Weed control, okay. Weed control is normally a consequence of something. We're going to talk about it today. What else is good pasture management? Fertilization, rotational grazing, rotating cattle. Each grass blades above 2 inches, always. Good. I want to double that. Let's talk about 4 inches perhaps. And I'll explain why. Weed control, soil health, mud grass control. So you have a good understanding of what good pasture management is. And if I ask you, most of you are going to have the same issues in terms of pasture management. That's why we can be here to share some of those ideas. Let me take one step further here. I want to ask you, what are the main issues you have on your pasture? Which I think kind of overlaps with that. But if you were to pick one issue, okay, so we're identifying some of those issues. Overgrazing, deep shade, so we have some shaded areas, soil health, compaction. Overgrazing, compaction go together here. Centipede grass many times go together with that overgrazing. So what I'm going to try to put together here today is that a lot of those things are connected. And when we start fixing a few things and doing things back as we should, not skipping, we're going to solve a lot of those problems. Overgrazing being one of the most important problems that we have all across, and it's not only in Florida. In many other places I've seen, overgrazing becomes one of the main issues. And guess what? We have a good opportunity here today with this market to reduce our herds, to cool some cows. Why not? Cool cow, make money, invest on the property, and then you fix some of the overgrazing. Okay, last question I have for you. Last year, did you fertilize your pastures? All of them, or most of them, some, or not at all? We have a lot of people that did some fertilization, but not a lot. Some have not fertilized. And this is one of the important things we're going to talk today in terms of capitalizing in that high cattle market and the benefits of that. What can we invest on our farms? What can we invest in our properties? And by the way, fertilizer is not the only way we can manage pasture. There's many other things, but it's one of the important things that affect the persistence of that pasture. Let's think about what good pasture management means from my perspective. Okay, I'm a little biased because I think overgrazing is one of the biggest things that we need to combat here. So we need to make sure that we can produce more forages than we can use. We need to make sure that the balance between forage production and forage demand is positive. What happens with our bank account? If our balance is negative, you're in trouble. You start getting interest. You start getting fees on that. Same thing on the pasture. You start withdrawing that carbohydrate reserve. You start declining that pasture and your animals affect. So poor grazing management is going to result in poor pasture and poor cattle production, period. So adjusting the stocking rate is a big thing. But if you only have one pasture, if you only have one forage, you don't have a forage system. Most of us rely only on Bahia grass. Many of us don't have any subdivision of our pastures. And that is a big problem. We need to diversify that forage production system. We cannot count only on Bahia grass. We need to make sure that that there is nutrient balance, and I'm thinking about soil nutrient balance here because my talk was more fertilizer oriented. But y'all saw today from Dr. Thristock that we also need to make sure that the animal nutrient balance is there. And we have grazing management. Okay, a little bit of context. Everybody knows very well about this. We are in an extreme drought. We've been on a drought since summer. Fall was dry, winter was dry, winter was cold. We had some first frosts here in Mariana November 9th, when those school seasons were just coming out of the ground. For those that were able to plant, some people didn't plant like me. I didn't plant until mid-December because I didn't have any rain. I couldn't risk planting. And they're this big. I don't have forage for my cattle, my farm. So the conditions are very complicated. But we also have very good cattle prices. We saw that earlier today with Hannah. However, although the prices are great, the margins are also slightly more. Cost of production has increased a lot. And I'm no economist, so I'm going to leave it at that. With one message that high cattle prices does not mean high profitability. Because if we're not doing a good job, we're not efficient, we're wasting money. Rick Matchin from the King Grain Institute put here, in 2025, the high prices did not guarantee profitability. And those that have low cost and high productivity benefit the most. That's high efficiency. And we can only find that efficiency when our system is tuned. Where did we get sloppy? 2022, Doug called me and said, hey, I want to talk for the Beef Cattle Conference about how to manage fertilization with high prices. Fertilizer went sky high. We saw $800 ton of ammonium nitrate or even more. I don't remember exactly the numbers, but we're very high, okay? And I had this slide here. If pasture condition is good, and soil pH, soil phosphorus and potassium is okay, we may be able to skip a little bit, but we need to be careful. This is not a long-term strategy. And if we do that for a while, we can have negative consequences, okay? And I think a lot of us went in that direction of reducing the amount of fertilizer in our pastures, especially when you think about hay, that's a big problem, okay? And we're seeing some of the consequences from that strategy a couple of years back. We had to do that, we couldn't afford, but now we need to reevaluate. Lack of fertility is going to reduce your productivity and also weaken your pastures. Once you have weaker pastures, you have secondary problems. You have mole crickets coming up. We have very weak root systems because those plants are already weakened by lack of fertility, by lack of nutrition, and they are more susceptible to those mole crickets. They are more susceptible from fungal diseases like the take-all. And last year, I had a lot of extension agents sending me samples, soil analysis, and pictures from pastures that like, hey, what's going on here? This is degrading. I got 2 here to show in 2 different counties. And what is the common denominator normally there? Is that soil potassium has been neglected. It's very, very low. Nutrition is not only potassium, but potassium is highly associated to the immune system of the plant, to persistence. Nitrogen is like the gas in the car. Move fast. You put more nitrogen, move fast. But you need that engine oil. You need that potassium there. You also need phosphorus. You also need to pay attention to the pH. So those little things together are going to make a huge difference. And normally, when we see pasture decline, is associated to 2 things. Overgrazing, as you told me, and lack of fertility. And I have here, it is a double cost because now you invest a little bit, but not much, just a little bit. You're not getting much out of it. And now you need to buy forage. So you're not getting anything. And now you have more cost because you need to buy forage. And then if you would say a third cost, over time that pasture declines and you need to reestablish it. Okay, this is IFA's recommendation for Bahia grass fertilization. I risk to say that we are also to blame for some of those issues because most beef cattle producers are operating in a low input level. And our recommendation is that when you're operating Bahia grass in a low input, you're going to only apply nitrogen at 50 to 60 pounds per acre in the spring. But if you don't take care of the other nutrients in the long term, you're going to have problems. So our medium level, we're splitting that 100 pounds of nitrogen in the spring and in the summer with whatever potassium and phosphorus we need to reach that medium level in the soil analysis. We're not shooting for high, we're shooting for medium here for maintenance. And then of course, when we're in a hay system, we're going to have to put a lot more nitrogen because we want more production. And because we're putting more nitrogen, we're going to have to put more potassium and phosphorus there. Okay, it's balance, it's chemistry, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. There's no magic around that, okay? What is important is what we're getting out of that because you're gonna ask me like, okay, it's very good. You put more fertilizer, you get more grass. Is it economical? This is 2 different trials. This is actually from ONA that I put together this chart. So this months of the year and how amount of forage we produce in those pastures. They were either Argentine in blue and Pensacola in yellow, and the dashed line is low fertilization. The solid line is medium fertilization. Okay, low fertilization, 50 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year, as we recommend. The medium is that 100 is split in 2 applications. See the difference that we have in terms of total productivity and also in terms of the length of the growing season. So now, go back to your September or August when it stopped raining. At least for me in Gainesville, July 25th was the last rain we had until sometime the end of September. If I had fertilized that, we would still have forage. And then what happened in the fall, we get a little bit of rain in September, and then the fall was dry again, so that pasture never recovered. But if I had invested on that pasture, I would have forage until later in October and maybe November if I am not overstocked. If I am not overstocked, I'm playing things safe here. Okay, that lack of fertilization resulted in a lot of people buying hay in October, start feeding hay in October and buying a lot more hay this year. And I see many heads shaking. Same for me here. I operate in partnership with one of my neighbors. And he said, this is the first time I have bought hay in more than 20 years because we're not able to cut hay and we're not able to have good pastures because of lack of fertilization. Same information here, forage production. This is actually the production rate in the y-axis in the vertical here in different months of the year with low, medium, and high nitrogen fertilization, 40, 120, and 360 pounds to the acre. And you can see that yellow bar, those yellow bars, they vanish right around August. We still have Bahia grass there, it's just not growing. This is the growth rate, how much is growing per day. But when we put that nitrogen there, when we put that fertility, and by the way, this was nitrogen, also corrected P and K to that amount of nitrogen, then we were able to get forage production all the way into the fall. One caveat here. In this research, we saw that the highest level actually was not the most effective economically, but the medium one was, because the highest was too much and we did not get a lot more out of that high fertilization level. This is perennial peanut in the left, in Bahia grass and perennial peanut mix, and Bahia grass only in the right in the screen. And this is March 8th, a couple of years back. Probably can't see that too well, but you see that the shade of the green is different. It's the same camera. I didn't alter any of the picture, don't worry. But this deep is greener because it's also deeper and higher nitrogen. I didn't fertilize this. Nutrition does not only come from fertilizer, but it comes from the legumes. Because I have more nitrogen in the system through the peanut, now I have earlier forage production. And this, a lot of people are still feeding hay in March, in April, and maybe even May. With fertilized pastures, you can get forage production early. More nutrients, quicker establishment. Cool season forages this year, terrible year. The far half of this plot where my technician Maria is standing there is kind of the limit where the center pivot was. This is in a dairy, by the way, so it's effluent. That's the limit where the center pivot reached. After that, we did not have a lot of water, not much nutrients. And you see the effect we had, a lot less production, a lot more cold damage. What you see that is that there's cold damage and also some of the diseases that are set because of that delay forage production, because of the delay establishment. So again, another reason why taking care of our pastures early on is going to pay back, because we had a lot more. This is done. This is as much as we produced this year. And if you didn't take care in the early season, it didn't matter. We're not recovering that. So one important thing is that fertilization does not fix drought problems. This table here mentioned, well, you want to fix drought. Okay, I don't have a power to do that unless you have irrigation. But, and this is a very important but here. Healthy pastures survive better. They reach water at deeper depths. They rebound from a drought and dormancy season way quicker, okay? And we have also more forage going into the drought, like the summer, or into the winter, like I showed those charts of fertilization. Okay, I'm going to change topics here real quick. We're going to talk about pasture renovation. Hopefully you are not there. Hopefully you are not to the point, okay, I messed up, I need to renovate, but we see a lot of this and I have a lot of questions. How to decide when to pull the trigger and get that pasture renovated? First of all, why did the pasture decline? That's my big question. So renovating and keeping everything the same way we've been doing, that means that new pasture is going to have the same destiny as our old pasture, okay? So overgrazing, total and seasonal, I'm going to talk about those two. Lack of fertilization, and because of that, we have weed problems. I always joke with Dr. Sellers, if I can do my job well, he won't have his job. If I can convince you to manage pastures well, we're not going to have weed problems. That's not true. We always have the weeds. Look at that beautiful, beautiful heifer there grazing. Do you notice the height of that pasture? And do you notice the excreta, the feces there? That's parasite exposure when you overgraze. So let's do a little bit of drawing here. I have this bottom line here, which is my season, and I'm going to put Bahia grass growth. This is how much Bahia grass growth grows more in the summer or accumulation there. But remember, in my farm, I only have one pasture. I'm not even moving my animal. I'm feeding hay in that one pasture. And I get so excited in the spring, which is coming hopefully soon with moisture, in those blades like, okay, that Bahia is finally greening up. And what do the cows do? Awesome. They go there and eat because they love that lush forage. And what happens to the Bahia grass? Goes down. And then another blade comes up, and we keep doing that. And we keep doing that. And we keep doing that. So when we don't move our animals out of that pasture early in spring, they're going to reduce the total amount of production of that Bahia grass pasture. They're going to delay that peak of growth, and they're going to deteriorate that pasture. They're going to cause that pasture to decline because we're always borrowing more from the reserves. We're always borrowing more money. And that's what happens in the spring in many farms when we don't have any system of grazing management. Sacrifice lot, that's why we have those. Ideally, you have other pastures that you can rotate them from to that pasture that is growing actively, maybe cool season forages, except this year, cool season forages, and then coming back to that Bahia grass where you can avoid that problem. So work on addressing the causes of pasture decline, understanding that seasonal forage growth. So I mentioned overgrazing seasonally. That's what I show. Overgrazing, the total overgrazing means that our system is completely overstocked. And not even in the summer, my grass can catch up with how much my animals need, and it's just going downhill. Make sure we have balanced nutrients in those soils and soil pH. And guess what? Organize our breeding season. Because if you don't organize our breeding season, you have animals eating year-round. You don't have opportunity to cool. You don't have opportunity to reduce your stock, to reduce your demand. And that's what I'm looking for. How can we improve forage production and also strategically reduce the demand of forage throughout the year? Fertilizer is not going to fix overstocking. One more point that I didn't write that. Rotational grazing is not going to fix overstocking. A lot of people, I'm just going to rotate my animals. Think about a pizza. Okay, and you have friends coming over, and you say, let me just slice this pizza in more pieces so everybody can eat. Yes, everybody can eat, but not everybody's going to get full. It's the same thing. We are overstocked. We need to fix that overstocking problem, and then those other tools and practices are going to be more effective. So when do I want to renovate? This is my house, actually. When we bought the pecan orchard, we have an integrated system with pecans and cattle there. And I went there, and there is a lot of weeds here, not very good forage, less than 50% cover of the target forage, which was Bahia grass that I wanted. I want to also change species and varieties because I want to implement perennial peanut here, and Riata Bahia grass here. So implement legumes. So that was a complete renovation for me. But peanut and Bahia grass is one of the most fantastic systems we can have here. It's very expensive to implement, but you get your money back in terms of animal productivity and fertilization, reduced fertilization costs. Okay, so it's a fantastic. Dr. Dubé always talks about that if you want more information. In this case here, I went to this pasture, and it was actually a management problem. There was some dead spots there. It's Bermuda grass. So it seems to be a lot. Do you think it will recover? Kind of borderline, right? It's a lot there. But what I like about this picture here, or this situation, is that we still have clumps of Bermuda grass spread. That means there is opportunity for spread. So if we take care of this, we may be able to recover. And Bahia is very expensive to establish anyhow. This is another picture of the same pasture, and you see that it is declining, but it's not too bad. What about this one here? Okay, so this was actually management also. You notice the rows here. This was anhydrous ammonia applied when it was dry, and it burned. It killed the plants. So now the plants are dead. Now I have big patches where I don't have any plants, and it's Bahia grass. It's not going to spread like Bermuda grass. So this is a potential candidate for renovation now. So identify the reasons why the pasture decline. I'm a big proponent of using annual grasses. I think annual grasses can have a fantastic opportunity here. I'll talk more about that. We can reduce weed pressure. We can use different herbicides. We can use different strategies with herbicides when we use some annual forages here to reduce that weed seed bank. And also, for example, imagine you are changing from Pensacola Bahia grass to Riata Bahia grass. You have that seed bank there. You don't want contamination. By waiting for 2 or even 3 years, you can get that seed bank to germinate. By the time you put your Riata, it's going to be only Riata. You eliminated most of the Pensacola. Same rationale for Bermuda grass. Same rationale for weeds. You can reduce that seed bank. And also it gives you a chance to improve that soil nutrient prior to replanting. That means you give your forage, your new pasture, better chance to establish. Opportunity for annuals, as I mentioned, clean the area, reduce seed bank, and a big opportunity to diversify and increase cattle gain. Diversify forage base and increase cattle gain. I'm a big proponent of annual forages until they don't work, right? We all had those examples. But the deal is, most of the time they work and they work super well. We have strategies to make them work. This year was exceptional. I mean, there's nothing I can do about the cold weather we had. We had extremely cold. Every single forage species that we planted in our trials suffered this year. But I've been here 8 years and that's the first time I see that. So if I can take one heat in 8, I'm good. Let's do that. Summer annuals, most of us think about annuals as winter annuals, ryegrass, oat, rye, triticale, and all that. Summer annuals, also interesting. This is per millet, and on the right side here is a mixture between per millet, cowpea, and sun hemp. It's actually for an experiment we had with sheep grazing, and they do fantastic grazing. So we're talking about 6 to 8 tons of dry matter to the acre. This is probably 3 times more that you can get with Bahia grass in some of the cases, and it's just some of this is 1 cut or 2 or 3 cuts, not a full season. But the main thing is we're looking into 55 to 60, 65% total digestible nutrients. So you can really put some animal gain when using those annual forages. And now strategic supplementation of those animals, crib feeding or crib grazing, and all those strategies that come to mind. Now you have resources to do that with those forages. Let me do a little more of drawing here. So in the bottom is my ear, and what I have there are different forages. So our peak of growth in the summer here is our warm season perennials. That's normally what we have. In the warm season annuals, we can plant them in different times of the summer. So there's a flexibility in that planting date with an understanding that the later I plant, it's going to go down in terms of total productivity. Okay, so we need to compensate for a little bit that, but they can be used as a strategy. Late planting dates have shorter seasons, so we're not accumulating as much. Beyond the pasture, okay, beyond pasture, how do we manage our pasture well? I want to think about a forage system, because we don't operate in a pasture system. We're operating in a forage livestock system. Okay, we need to understand markets. We need to understand the increasing costs and variable weather. How can we operate into that? And for me, in my opinion, you need resilience, you need diversity. So planning your forage system includes adjusting your stocking rate. Third time I mentioned that, adjusting your stocking rate. Diversify your forage production. Again, make sure that you are not relying on only one forage species, okay? Choice of varieties matter. Not all Bahia grasses are the same. Not oats are the same. Not all ryegrasses are the same. They have different adaptations. They have different growing curves. They have different tolerance to insects and diseases. And of course, there is grazing management. This is my chart again. Let's look at it. Warm season perennial grasses. Let's think about stockpile limpo grass. We have an area that we can plant small grains and even ryegrass and clovers. And you see how now I'm going from one forage growing one time of the year to a much more diverse system with different paddocks in my farm, with more adapted forages that I have forages year-round. If you've seen any presentation I gave, you probably see this chart many times, and I keep insisting on it because for me, this is one of the most important principles of a livestock production system. That diversity, having forages that you can grow. And there are the warm season annuals that I mentioned before. Does it pay to plant Riata? This is March 20th. It's a fertilizer trial last year. And you see how much forage we have there. Pensacola was still brown, just coming out. This is variety difference. So there is a lot of differences in those varieties. Different varieties have different place in the system. Consult your local extension agent if you want to talk more about variety choices, because we have a lot of resources. And here we go. That's how I want to end. Overgrazing means less forage, period. You say you are not going to starve a profit out of a cow. You're not going to overgraze forage out of her pasture. You cannot get more production by overgrazing. When you start grazing too early, when you overgraze, you are going to reduce your root system. When you reduce the root system, you are going to affect the capacity of that plant to uptake nutrients, including water and other nutrients in the soil, okay? So I don't have a solution for the drought unless I have irrigation, but I can make my forages more resilient to that drought by proper grazing management. And with proper grazing management, we can also improve productivity. Just by not grazing down to the ground, we can almost double production and increase average daily gain on our animals because we're harvesting only the best forage and we're leaving a lot behind so we can have more forage production. And also, even though we have a lower stocking rate, because we destocked, we reduce our animals so we avoid overgrazing, because my gain per animal is higher, I have still greater gain per area when I'm removing those animals. So don't get sloppy. Take advantage of the good market now, of the great opportunity we have in the livestock sector to produce more cattle and more forages, sell some animals at good prices and reinvest that in the property, and invest in management that has long-term returns. Today we can do that. Sometimes, some years we can't, but today we can. Thank you so much. This podcast was brought to you by the University of Florida Forage Team with technical support from the University of Florida, College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, Faculty Instructional Resource and Support Team. This episode was produced by Marcelo Wallau, Olivia Mowley, and Ashley Kanabrowski. We hope you have enjoyed this podcast. If you have any comments or thoughts to share with us, please reach out to us through our email, forages@ifas.ufl.edu, and find us on our social media, uf.forages on Instagram, UF Forage Team on Facebook, or UF IFAS Forages on YouTube. We hope to see you in our next episode. And this is our podcast, where we dive into the main topics affecting livestock and forage production in the southeastern United States. Join us in this journey as we tackle the main issues affecting our producers and the sustainability of our production systems.